Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? And we are live for another edition of Contracting Chatter. I am your host, Luciana Turner, and I just want to cut off my notification on my other devices. How are you doing this morning? Hopefully, you had a productive day yesterday, and we're off to the races running. And because I have a habit of not having my volume up on Instagram, let's get this party started. As we know, contracting chatter is basically a daily dose of legislation, regulation around government contracting, and legislation for government contracting and business. I'm your host, Luciana Turner. I am the founder and CEO of the LT&A Consulting Group. For those of you who are new to Contracting Chatter, welcome. For those of you who have been around for a while, glad to see that you're returning. You know how we do. As you enter the room, say hello. Drop a comment in the chat. I respond to all comments. If you're catching this by the replay, hashtag replay. I do have a small ask. If you find value in this program, share it. That's all. Share it with your colleagues, share it within your network, share it within your community. So let's get this party started. One thing I do want to talk about this morning is compliance in government contracting. And it's within the realm of regulations because people unfortunately feel compliance isn't important until somebody knocks on your door and say you have to write a check for not following the rules. Then all of a sudden compliance becomes important and everybody wants to talk about what they did and did not know. And unfortunately, you're not knowing or you're pretending you didn't know is not, it doesn't excuse you not following the rules. When we decided to hang up our shingles, the proverbial shingles, and become business owners, and for those who took the additional step to becoming government contractors, we also said that we would find out what the rules of engagement are. I use that language a lot. And that means that we absorbed responsibility of knowing what the rules are. And with that said, compliance is adhering to all rules, regulations, contract terms, et al. That are applicable to you, whether it be within the industry, whether it's accounting, finance, and we're all governed by multiple layers of rules. We have our local regulations, we have our state regulations, we have our federal regulations, we have our contracting terms. All of these govern how we conduct a business. In addition to, and I'm getting ready to add a layer of moral obligations, which should be our ultimate guide, but I digress. Now, on Friday, I touched on FAR, which is the Federal Acquisition Regulation. And although FAR is not applicable to all government contracts, there are FAR clauses incorporated into contracts by reference, and there are FAR clauses that are written into contracts, whether FAR governs that part of the government or not. And I wanted to, good morning, how are you? I wanted to spend not an inordinate amount of time because FAR can be a lot of people it says this and that's it. There are layers to FAR. FAR has subparts. And when you try to just read the top part of FAR and run with it, that's where people get in trouble. And when you don't deep dive into FAR and obtain that deeper understanding, that is really where people get in trouble. And it's just, and that's where you need the help of a consultant or wise counsel when it comes to interpreting FAR clause and people who have been doing this thing for a long time. But there are FAR clauses that I wanted to kind of bring to you can get a copy of FAR and I recommend everybody in government contracting have a copy of FAR. And that the latest copy of FAR went into effect March 6th of 2023. FAR is updated annually. The last updated FAR was made in November, was the last update made. And that update went into law in February. So they just issued a new set of FAR. You can download it off of the Federal Acquisition Regulation website. I recommend if you're going to the website, if you're going to use an online reference, go to acquisition.gov. If you're going to buy a copy, I like hard copy. If you're going to buy a copy, buy it from the U.S. publishing office. If you want to know why, I'm going to tell you why. Because the subscription comes with all the updates. It's going to cost you more money, but they automatically send you the updates. That's why you pay for the money. You get what you pay for, and your investments need to be a little more savvy. So when you buy from the publishing, when you buy it from the government sends you every update automatically. When you buy it from Amazon, you can buy it from Amazon for like $30 or $40, true, but it doesn't come with the updates. So there's that. There are 3 parts I want you to kind of focus in or hone in on. FAR Part 19 deals with small business programs. And you're probably trying to figure out, why am I talking about this? I want you to gain an understanding and chatter is only 30 minutes. And if you can't take 30 minutes to learn how to make $1 million, there's something wrong. Every small business program in the federal government is governed by in some way, shape, or form, is governed by the Federal Acquisition Regulation. So if you want to know how these rules are played out, and you feel like you've been done a disservice in some way, shape, or form, you start with FAR. If you want to make sure you're operating in all intents and purposes where they're supposed to be, because sometimes we default into we're right and we may not be. Start with FAR. If you're trying to build your business on a compliant, strong foundation, I love to use housing analogies. You don't build a 1,700 square foot house on a 300 square foot foundation. So start with FAR. So every small business program is incorporated. Okay, FAR is the Federal Acquisition Regulations. If FAR is an acronym, the government is going to acronym you to death. So FAR is the Federal Acquisition Regulation. You will also find the cost accounting standards are incorporated in FAR. And that is the governing rules for how your accounting system needs to be set up. And what I want to tell you about that is simply this. A lot of accountants say they can do government accounting, but that doesn't mean they're government accountants. So when you're hiring a government accountant and they say, oh, I can do government accounting, make sure they have the experience. Because I have seen far too often people say, I'm a government accountant, I can do government accounting, and they have no government accounting experience because they think all accounting is the same. And then when you go to submit an invoice, that invoice is incorrect and gets rejected. And you can't figure out why it's being rejected because it's not following CAS. Because you can't invoice the government the same way you would invoice a consumer or customer. So when you're hiring, even when you're hiring a biller to do government billing, you should ensure they have some training or send them to training on how to do government billing. Because a lot of small businesses complain about not receiving their payments from the government on time. And I would say 7 times out of 10, and I'm throwing that number out in the atmosphere, but I'm also going back to a conversation I've had with actual contracting officers. The billing error is on the part of the small business because they're submitting improper bills. So your cost accounting standards are incorporated within FAR, which is your Federal Acquisition Regulations. And it tells you how to submit your billing. It tells you how you should record your costs. It tells you how to segregate your costs. All of these things, what's allowable, what's unallowable. Your contract tells you what's unbillable. And there's a difference between billable and unallowable costs. And you can have an allowable cost that's unbillable. All of these things. So government contracting have various moving parts. And far too often, what happens when small businesses come into the space is they're bringing their commercial antics or their commercial regulations into the government space, and it doesn't work. And then they get frustrated, which is one of the reasons I'm saying come to the intensive so we can help you with that. Now, we can't cover everything in the intensive, but we can cover a lot in the intensive so that we can help you get past the frustration of not knowing what you don't know. So those small business programs are outlined within FAR. Contract financing, is well, a lot of people don't know there are various ways to finance contracts, but they're all regulated or governed by FAR. There's a lot of agencies who do not like some of these fancy financing tools that are out there. And a lot of small businesses are coming into the government space using some of these hybrid tools. And then when they come in here using these hybrid tools and their rubber meets the roads and they lose the contract and they don't understand why, default to FAR. A lot of these tools can't be used because of the governing regulations within the federal space. And a lot of people are like, well, why do you care? Step back for a minute and take off your contracting hat and put on your taxpayer hat. As a taxpayer, how do you view some of these things? As a taxpayer, why would you want to pay more? Because some of these hybrid tools carry a higher rate. So to work with this contractor, you're paying more because this contractor is using some of these fancier methods to fund this contract. So this contractor is paying a heavier load than this contractor over here. As a taxpayer, why would I want to do that when we could just award this contract over here? That's the taxpayer side, which is why FAR Part 32 talks about contract financing. So there's like various nuances to this thing. And then a lot of people want to do subcontracting or become a subcontractor in government contracting to get your feet wet, to kind of introduce and acclimate yourself to the process. That's cool. FAR Part 44 lays out subcontracting rules and regulations. Do you not know that a recent change made within FAR keeps primes from doing what I call baiting and switching? Once upon a time, there was this whole thing where primes were bidding contracts using one subcontractor to win the award and then giving all the work to somebody else. Well, a new change in FAR stopped that from happening. They have to justify not giving that work to the subcontractor that they bid with. And basically, they have to say you just couldn't do the work. So they just can't bid you and not give you work. They have to give you work and then prove that you are capable of doing the work. That's what FAR does for you. If you have a working knowledge of FAR, if you're working with somebody who can help you. interpret FAR and utilize it for your benefit. Hey, Lalanya. So FAR, and I just pulled out those 3 clauses because they were pertinent to small businesses. Now, I want to talk about the definition of small business, because small business has a different definition depending upon the NAICS code that you're operating in, because a small business is up to and inclusive of $10 million in revenue, depending upon the NAICS code that you're operating in. So small business is not necessarily a company only in business for 1 year. Your NAICS code determines your definition of small business. You can graduate from being a small business according to your revenue. Now I'm doing a whole lot of teaching at this point, but that's okay. That's just my nature. And that's just my nature. You can graduate from being a small business within your NACE code. So knowing your NACE codes, knowing your revenue, and then you're trying to figure out, well, why am I no longer considered a small business? Well, because according to your NACE codes and your revenues, you're not a small business anymore. So you have to understand how you can toggle in and out, keeping your understanding fresh. I will tell anybody, government contracting isn't static. You must stay aware, stay abreast of what's going on. And running a government contracting company is a new level of leadership. It's a new level of it's executive level leadership. There's a episode of my podcast, Contractor's Conversation. It's everywhere you can hear podcasts, Google Podcasts. It's actually on Spotify. Contractor hyphen conversations if you go look it up on Spotify. I have a leadership coach on there, and she talks about that up leveling. And she's actually a contracting officer in the Veterans Administration. And one of the things she talks about is the leadership level of the small business contracting office and contractors that she runs into. It's very, very important. Now, I want to drop this last thing, and this is like a do you know? Did you know that there is a committee of small business in Congress? There is a House Committee on Small Business. So when there are issues that are important to you as a small business, there's actually a committee within Congress, and I believe there's a comparable one in the Senate. Listen to their hearings. See what is before them that they feel is important to small businesses. And when those issues do not align, ring them up and tell them, hey, I see what's on your agenda, and I don't know where you got that from, but that's not what's important. We as small business owners have to start aligning or ensuring that the rules and regulations coming through Congress and Senate are in line with what's going to enable us to grow as business owners. Now, this is not a political platform. However, legislation will make or break us. We're getting ready to go into an election year. So who is in House, Senate, the presidency, our local elections is very important. Those rules and regulations, those tax hikes, determines our rates. It determines how we can hire, how fast we can grow. So all of these things, keeping an eye on all of these things is very, very important. And for those who say, well, it's two sides of the same bird, okay, that's a nice little cliche. But it doesn't change the fact that everything, every law, every regulation that comes through ultimately affects how fast you can grow your business. So keeping an eye on what's coming through and how and when it impacts your business is very, very key. It's very, very important. and it's important to your strategic planning. So, with that said, I would pay attention to what are these rules and regulations that are coming out from the Committee on Small Business. I would pay attention to these small business initiatives that are coming out, because some of them, quite frankly, are anti small business. I don't care what they say, they're hurtful to small business. And with that, I'm going to close out today. I'm going to invite you to come back and join me tomorrow morning for another installment of Contractors Chatter. I invite you to check out my podcast. As I said, my podcast is Contractors Conversation. It's everywhere podcasts are heard. I'm on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. I'm just everywhere. I have a great two-parter on leadership that I believe everybody really, really, really should listen to. And then I have one on recruiting and bidding. And in light of some things that just went on with security clearance and someone that was just found spying in the DOD, and those who are interested in going after those contracts in Department of Defense, I would suggest paying attention to that recruiting and HR conversation around that. It's going to be an interesting next couple of years. So, as we go through this day, it looks to be another beautiful day, at least where I'm at. Take some time out throughout the day to walk away from your work and to decompress, because a stressed mind can't create. So take time to decompress, to walk away from work, read a book, commune with nature, exercise, whatever you need to do to take and relieve stress. Because it's important to take care of your health, your mental, your emotional, your physical health as we build our companies and as we build our business. It's important to regulate your stress. You know, the news is full of stressful information. I don't even listen to the news anymore. I listen out for information that is pertinent to the upbuilding of my business, but all that other stuff, I don't even pay too much attention to. If I can't control it, I don't ingest it. I really had to do that for my own mental sanity. You do what you have to do for yours. And with that, I will see you on tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, for another installment of Contracting Chatter. Have an amazing, amazing day. If you wish to book a strategy session, my calendar link is in the description. If you wish to join my mailing list so you can stay abreast of what's going on with upcoming training classes, and to buy tickets to the Contractors Intensive that is October 4th, 5th, and 6th in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we will talk about financing, business credit. We will talk about developing a true capture and development plan, a bid and proposal system. We're going to do all of that in the room, so when you walk out, you will walk out with a true government contracting plan. Until tomorrow, this is Luciana Turner, your host of Contractors Chatter. Have an amazing, amazing